Hey guys, Chef Austin here from Primal Pastures, and today we're gonna go over some tips and tricks for cooking grass-fed, grass-finished beef. One of the first things I consider when cooking my steak is what kind of pan I'm gonna use. Am I gonna be using a pan? Am I gonna be using a grill? I think one of the best pans to use is a cast iron pan. It holds heat really well so you can keep a nice even cooking temperature all the way through the cook time. A grill is another great option if you want to impart some smoky flavor into your steak. With the grill, you just want to make sure your coals are cooked all the way down. You don't want any smoke coming off of them. Another mistake I see out there is when people are cooking their steak, they have the pan so hot that it curls up your steak. I do agree with having a hot pan, but not so hot that when you put your steak on that it curls up, meaning that the edges are touching and the middle kind of lifts off the pan. Make sure you have a good amount of high heat oil in your pan. Put your steak down, give it one press in the beginning, then don't touch it again. You just want a good connection between your meat and the pan. Another mistake we typically see is dried out meat. The reason I see this happening a lot of the times are people are probing their steak too many times during the cooking process. A little hack I like to use when temping my steak is right here on my hand. So I take my pointer finger and touch it to my thumb, and that right there is about a rare. And I touch my index finger, and that's about a medium rare. And I touch my ring finger with my thumb, and that's about a medium well. And all the way to the pinky is gonna be about well done. And every time you can kind of feel how your hand tightens up. So that's pretty close to how it should feel when you're temping your steak. So some of you haven't been loving the way your steaks have been turning out. And I don't always think it comes down to the cooking technique. It comes down to choosing the right steak for you. Some of you might want a very fatty steak, and you're choosing a New York strip, which is typically a leaner steak. It does have a fat cap, but it is a leaner steak. Some of you might want a leaner steak or a more tender steak, and you're choosing a ribeye. A ribeye is gonna be heavily marbled. You're gonna get a lot of flavor, but you're gonna definitely have some fat in there that you might have to deal with. Some of you might want something in the middle. I like to go with a flat iron, but this does have a grain in it that you wanna cut across. So make sure you just know your steak, right? There's some steak have grains, some don't. Another tip for cooking a great steak is choosing the right salt. I typically use 2 different salts while cooking the same steak. I use a very fine sea salt when I'm seasoning my steak. The reason being is it has a great cover pattern. The very small granules will really cover tight on the steak. I do use Maldon when cooking my steak, but that's after I cook my steak. I cut it, I expose the flesh, and then I finish it with a little Maldon on top. So another mistake I typically see is treating every steak the same, regardless of size and thickness of the steak. You're not gonna be able to take a super thin steak and flip it multiple times on the grill, trying to get those 4 flips to get those nice cross hatch marks. You're probably just gonna have to settle with the lines on each side and just getting a flip on each side and then being done. The thicker one, you're gonna have more time to do things like basting, and if you wanna do those 4 flips on the grill to get those nice cross hatch marks on there, you can do that as well. One of the biggest issues that I hear with grass-fed beef is that it's tough or that it's dried out after you're done cooking it. I think the biggest reason for that is that it's not getting enough time to rest. Resting is probably the one most important thing that we can do with a steak, is giving it time to cool down to a temperature where the molecules aren't moving so quickly so that all our juice doesn't run out when we cut into our steak. I like to let my steak rest the full length of the cook time. So if it took me 6 minutes to cook my steak, I'm gonna rest it for 6 minutes. And if you do that, you should have a nice, juicy, tender steak at the end. Another tip I wanted to tell you about is what type of oil and when to add your oil to the pan. So you need to use some type of high heat oil. My favorite is avocado oil. High heat oil means that it won't smoke when you put it in your pan as long as it's under 475 degrees. I like to add my oil right before I'm gonna add my steak. I don't wanna put my oil in as I turn on my fire because that's gonna give it time to cook the oil, and then your oil can actually burn that way and leave a funky taste on your steak. Thanks for joining us today. If you want to view more like it, check out becomewellwithin.com or primalpastures.com.